Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Busy. I hope you enjoyed today's story. And if you do, please subscribe. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Busy with Joey Marino. Hi, Joey.
Hi, Busy. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited that you're here.
Me too.
I met Joey up in Palm Beach at Bethesda by the Sea. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know him and watch him and see you actually in action. I'm a voyeur. Do you ever know that? Like, I'm a voyeur and watching people all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, watch people.
Yeah.
And when you're watching somebody, because they don't know you're watching. So you're watching and you're like, wow, that person's authentic. Because for so long, at least when I was drinking, and before, when I came in here at 30, when I got sober at 37, everything was always about the outside, right? I got the right jeans on. I got the right jacket. I got the right belt. I got the right bag. But on the inside, I felt so sad and like it's just lonely and alone and never fitting really. And so now when you see somebody that's actually walking the walk and talking the talk like you are, it warms my heart.
What a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really nice to see. How did you, or what made you get sober? What was your journey like?
I never wanted to admit that I always abused substances, but I did. And I think I've always been addicted to more. So it was always kind of like, how can I amplify any situation? There was always, how can I have bigger? How can I have better? So it's always been a reoccurring theme in my life. And it wasn't until I really changed my atmosphere. I mean, I grew up in New York. I went to school in New York, all of these things. I'm a New Yorker through and through, a New York City kid. And when I left New York in my late 20s for what I thought was going to be the dream suburban life in Florida, I was like a fish out of water. And I started to collapse quickly and swiftly. And it took me a couple of years to build my life back up. And I feel like I kind of came into the program like on the first step, just with the surrender. I kind of got my life back after like hitting my rock bottom. And I just remember looking around with my rebuilt life with all the things that it took me like 5 years to get back and just being like, stuff's going to happen again. And I don't have it in me. Like I don't have another recovery. And that's kind of when I surrendered. I was just like, I don't want to lose this all. And so it was kind of an easier, softer foray into the rooms, to be honest. Like I didn't come in kicking and screaming. I was just like, what's the homework? What are these 12 steps you're talking about? Give me them right now. So
I'm the same way. So you didn't go to treatment?
I did.
You did? I didn't go to treatment.
It saved my life. It was the best decision I ever made, but like no one forced me into that either. I kind of just woke up one day. It's like, I'm going to go to treatment. And I went, and it was right before COVID. It saved my life because it slowed down the drink significantly. And I think coming into that pandemic, if I didn't have those tools, I'd be dead. And I didn't drink that much, if you will, for a while, but like the what was it? The belly full of beer, head full of AA. Like I just felt the Catholic guilt and shame every time I picked up a drink thereafter. And I really hadn't gotten drunk for a couple of years, but I didn't know how to stop. I just didn't know how to stop. And I feared alcohol, and I didn't want to live with that fear anymore.
Did you grow up was there a lot of drinking in your?
You know what? Not really. It's funny because my parents don't really drink. They never really did. Like we had a bar in our basement. It's very like Italian, like, columns and M for our last name monogram. It was like really quite gauche. There was tons of booze. But my parents didn't really drink very much. And I don't know. I always thought it was kind of glamorous. My drink was a dirty martini, extra dirty, seawater dirty. Like the waiter always knew what that meant. I'm really good at creating visuals, and but I always wanted more. I think it was for me. It was like I didn't know when to stop. There was no such thing as one martini. It was like multiple, and then you pass out, and then you do it again the next day. But I thought it just went with the good life. That was for me. I just thought alcohol and the good life went together, and it was champagne and martinis and rosé all day. And then I burnt out very, very.
So in high school, you weren't like, you were the class president. You were the valedictorian of your class. And
I wasn't valedictorian, but I certainly was class president. Yeah.
yeah, you were class
Yeah.
president. You said even in elementary school.
Yeah.
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 So everybody loved you at school, but you weren't a partier.
No, I mean, like I was to an extent, but I wasn't the biggest partier. I like being around people. I love social situations. I love big energy moments, and I love being a part of them. And I always thought the alcohol amplified it. I didn't really realize it was dulling it the last hour. if you will.
Yeah, it's crazy because I was kind of the same way in the drinking. I'd have one and then I'd have a 47. I still remember here, like almost 19 years later, standing outside this bar in Philadelphia, going, I'm only going to have one dirty martini. That's it. And then I'd wake up the next day and go, I had a dirty martini. I had a sex on the beach. I had a couple bottles of wine. I had a shot of whiskey. It was always went more. So what were the biggest challenges you faced in your first year of sobriety, do you think?
The peace, which I didn't realize was peace at first. I'm a very go person, and just sitting in the quiet and the tranquility that I'd never experienced before. I thought it was boredom, and it really wasn't. It was just like me having a moment to breathe and meditate on life and really think clear thoughts. It's very uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable to just sit in the peace. I'm so not used to it. It's really what I needed this whole time. I needed the peace and quiet. So I think that was probably the most difficult. And I kept my recovery sort of to myself in the beginning because I really didn't want to add too much pressure of it. And it almost felt like this double life. Like the recovery Joey didn't really mix with the non-recovery Joey. It reminded me of when I was in the college. I was in the closet for most of my life until college. And I always felt like there was this dark secret, this other side of me that people didn't know. And in the beginning of recovery, that's kind of what it felt like too, was like there's a part of me that I would like to share because I want to be authentic. And I didn't know how to go about doing that for a while. And I didn't even tell my own family I was recovery. They had no idea. So I think I wound up adding more pressure to it because then it was like, well, how am I going to tell people? Do I have to tell people? What's that like? And then you go through the whole trip of trying to figure things out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But the surrender too, just like the letting go, like the not, playing director and actor and playing all of those roles, and the living in the thy will be done was very strange for me for like the first half. Then I started to lean in. I was like, it's just so much easier. I just don't know anything.
Oh my gosh, you've already gotten that. Okay, you
Yeah.
guys know that for me, it's
Not
like
always.
it's the hardest one.
It's
With
the hardest
step
part.
3, it was
Yeah.
like letting go. So wait, I want to pivot back. So you were in New York City. Were you doing like all the partying, going to all the clubs, like doing the fast
I
life?
was, and I had an older brother, so I was able to
Well,
use
you
his
have
ID.
him still. We're gonna say
Right, I do have him. He's still here. And I use his ID. And the cool thing was like I was really into music. I still am. I love music, and I love Britney Spears. And I would take the Staten Island ferry after school, and I would go outside TRL and I'd wait for her. And then I would go to clubs where she was performing and stuff. So I loved music, and I think one of the blessings of being a New York City kid was like I was able to really be in that life. And I went to nightclubs, and I was in the nightclub scene much earlier than anyone should be, but I grew up really fast. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of exposure to different people and cultures that I'd never have exposure to in a million years. So it allowed you to grow up really fast, and it allowed me to mature really quickly too.
Did your mom care that you were like
I don't
jumping
think
on
she
the-
knew. No, she had no idea because I grew up around a family business, and so my parents were always working. And so instead of coming home right after school, I'd take the ferry into the city. I'd go to Total Request Live, or I'd go to whatever show, and I would be home by 7, and my parents would come in the door and they'd think nothing happened. I would get my homework done on the ferry. No one had any idea that what I was up to.
And you were all by yourself.
Yeah, all by myself. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's kind of scary thinking
Yeah,
back.
it's very frightening.
Yeah, I mean,
It's very
maybe the
frightening.
world wasn't as bad. I don't think it was as crazy as it is
Yeah, who
today,
knows?
obviously.
Who knows?
Right. But you did it. And but you didn't, did you drink then, or you just kind of had a little bit, or what was it like?
No, I guess If I did, it wasn't too much. I mean, or I don't remember. I don't know. I think it went with that life. I mean, there were certainly like drugs and alcohol involved, but I mean, I wasn't. I was still showing up to school the next day.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so then you graduate from high school in Staten Island, all boys Catholic school, and you decide out of all the colleges in America, like how many colleges did you apply to, and why did you apply to school in Florida?
I really wanted to go to California for school. Actually, I really wanted to go to Pepperdine. Which I think my guidance counselor heard that, and Pepperdine's also is a Christian school. And my guidance counselor in high school was like, well, there's another Christian school that's by the beach and it's on the East Coast. And I was like sold, just, and my family always had a place in Juno Beach growing up, which was like maybe 30 minutes away from downtown West Palm Beach, where Palm Beach Atlantic is. And I kind of just figured I'll take it. I wanted to be anywhere but Staten Island. I think I recognized from an early age that it wasn't the right place for me. And I think my guidance counselor knew that too. So yeah, I found Palm Beach Atlantic and I thought it was where I belonged. Yeah.
And what year did you realize that you were gay and that you
Well,
you were ready to let the world know?
I think I always knew. I'd say like the earliest I had an inkling was probably like the 6th or 7th grade. I think my admiration for Britney Spears was not sexual. It was like I'd always looked at her and I was like, wow, she like that's that, but it wasn't in any way sexual. It was more of like a respect for like the feminine power. And some other stuff that I always recognized that there was something there. And I think my parents knew it too, deep down. Certain things I've been reflecting on recently where I feel like, oh, we all kind of knew. But it was a dark secret that I think even through I definitely knew in high school for the most part, and it was pretty depressing. Like I feel like the music and the running off to the city was what allowed me to escape it, and to see people who probably didn't care made it feel like a little bit lighter. So, but I knew I didn't relate to any of the people around me whatsoever. And when I went to a Christian school, I thought maybe I could kind of pray it away. I wasn't really sure. And I was kind of big man on campus for a while. I mean, I had the fake ID. I had my family's beach house that I throw the parties in. You weren't allowed to drink on this campus, like whatsoever. They have a no drinking policy. I think they still do. And you had to live on campus, but I had a way around it by not living on campus completely. And I would have everyone just kind of sleep at my house. But it was interesting because once I came out of the closet, I think it was like sophomore year, like end of sophomore year, all of these people who were like my best friends just completely abandoned me. So it was a rough period for me where I was like, I was as authentic as I thought I needed to be. And it was a really dark process for me, just coming to terms with who I was and being honest about it, and then being shunned for it. It was dark. And it left me with like a really weird taste for religion, because I was like, I thought this was, we were all forgiving and and accepted people for who they were. So it really took me a while to kind of reconcile what was going on in all of it. And I should say I had some really good friends throughout it too, but just not as many as I thought. And I had to grieve a lot of friendships that I thought they were friendships, but it was really confusing. It was very confusing.
Yeah. Isn't it hard when you think like all these people are and I always do air quotes if you're walking or in your car, you guys listening, I'm always going to do air quotes. Like I have so many friends. And then you change something about yourself. Like you get sober, you decide that you're going to come out and show everybody who you are. I don't love women. I love men. For me, I love, I were to love women. But to get out and you think, well, my friends love me. And then they disappear. And you're like, what happened? I thought you were my dear friends. And the craziest thing I get back to all the time, Joey, is my mom, when I was little, I always had all these friends. And my mom would say, Elizabeth, if you have 5 best friends by the time you die, like real friends that'll pick you up on the side of the road, you're so blessed. And she was so right. I was so wrong, because I thought it was more like the quantity than the quality, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it crazy? But as we grow up, we realize that. But when we're younger, I think we think, oh, I need 1,000,000 friends.
Sure.
And if I have 1,000,000 friends, I'm okay. But actually, if you have that one best friend, so if you're out there with just one best friend, you're very blessed, by the way. You're very blessed. Don't you agree?
I do. I think for me early on, I think it was the comfort of being surrounded by a lot of people, because it was a lot of attention, but not all of the attention, because there were so many people, if that makes sense. Like you kind of like drown it all out. If it's one-on-one, it's very authentic, but if you've got a room full of people, not everyone could possibly be paying attention. So you think. Yeah.
So then you graduate, you get through this dark time. And during this dark time, were you drinking? Would you go back to your parents' house and drink, or would you just?
Yeah. I drank a lot then. I thought wine was really glamorous. I was like, I'm a wino, and I drank a lot of Italian red wine. I thought I was a wine snob. That was my excuse. Well, I love wine. But I moved to New York City, and I just threw myself into my career immediately, and it took up a lot of space in my life. And I think it's kind of like what I did academically. I just kind of did that with work, where like I knew that like as long as I made work my entire personality, things would be okay. And they were for a while, and I was high achieving at work, and I did really well in corporate life. I burned out, like I would say, rather quickly, because I didn't know how to contain myself. But like living in New York City is just like, back then at least, the corporate life was very much like, you're drinking martinis after work, no one's driving, so there wasn't a like, how are you getting home?
Right.
You stumbled into a cab or an Uber, and then you did it all again the next day. So it was, for me, it was a lot lighter after college, because I was living in Greenwich Village in the city, and I was able to be myself. I met my now husband very early on, and life was like pretty normal and good. And I think once I moved back to Florida for what I thought was like the end all be all corporate job with this campus and car chargers and the gym and a cafeteria, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's like second to Google. I was like, I've made it. I've completely made it. And I learned really quickly that what a lot of the things I was covering up with being an overachiever came to bite me very quickly. Yeah.
And Anthony, I want to talk about a little bit about your love story.
Sure.
So where'd you meet Anthony?
We met at a New Year's Eve party 13 years ago. And it was a mutual friend that had brought me to this party. And we met early in the party, and we wound up talking the entire night. We were talking about watches, which is interesting because I have an obsession with the number 12. It's reoccurring in my life. And I actually have it tattooed on my wrist. I have a 12 tattooed there because I never leave home without a watch. And so I have my 12 no matter what. And it's really hard to see because my watch always covers it. Right. I got it on my 21st birthday.
Why? No, we have to go to this 12 thing. So what
I don't
happened?
know. Ever since I was a kid, I'm not born on the 12th or anything. 12 was a reoccurring number. It's my favorite number. I would say as early as like the third grade. I had to choose. Like I have dreams sometimes that I think my birthday is April 12th. I was born in April, but on the 2nd, not the 12th. And
was that your number too when you were playing soccer?
Yeah,
was your
number? My number. It's just always been reoccurring. Always reoccurring number. 12 is absolutely. So Anthony and I were in the corner of this party, and there's one picture from that night, and he and I are just like, and we pretty much hit it off from that moment, and we wound up getting married like 5 years later on New Year's Eve, and so now we've been together for 13 years, married for like 7. It's hard to do the math. And it's been good. We've been through a ton together, and he's my complete opposite. We're complete, and it just works. It works really, really well. And I think the best part about it is the communication. I think we both came into this relationship being completely honest and just like mature in our ability to communicate our needs, and it's really helped us.
Oh my gosh. Now, when you guys met, did your parents get along and everything? And what did your mom and dad
like immediately, I kind of immediately knew. I think he knew well. And I'm Italian, Anthony's Italian, and that just kind of worked. I was like, oh God, bringing home a guy is like one thing. My mom was like, is he Italian? I'm like, oh, thank God. I remember like we were in a car ride when I brought him around the first time. My mom was like saying something, and she turns around from the front seat. She's like, Anthony, you're Italian, right? Like as if like it's expected. Like he wouldn't bring home anyone, but like I think I knew from our conversations. We meshed really well. It was kind of love at first sight.
Oh my gosh. And your mom didn't care. Your mom and dad were open, it sounds
like. They really liked him. They really, really liked him. He's a genuinely good, well-spoken, well-mannered, just genuinely nice soul. Very personable, very sweet. And I think at that point I was like maybe was in my mid-20s. I was already kind of successful in my career, and I wasn't kind of living off my parents. And I think they were starting to get glimpses of me being just independent and happy for once. And I think they were happy for me in that moment. They still are. They really love Anthony. Sometimes I think more than me.
I love that. Yeah. I thought that about my ex-husband and my present husband. Now tell me this, is he a drinker, and was he a drinker with you?
No, and I think I always knew that. I when I first met him, he barely drank. He still will barely drink. And I think deep down inside, I knew I couldn't marry someone who was as much into the party life as me. And yeah, I just think I always knew. I think I needed a complete opposite in like the way they handled life, the way they thought. Yeah, not a drinker whatsoever.
So how has this sobriety influenced your relationship?
It's gotten better. I feel like we were always good about the communication. And I'm really blessed because I meet a lot of people in the rooms who are like, your partner's not one of us. Like, what's that like? And I'm like, I don't know. It seems fine. But he's always kind of given me the space to be who I need to be, and he doesn't really ask questions. And I think even like when I went to treatment, I was like, I'm going to treatment, and I was like, don't ask any questions. I'm just going to do this. And he was like, okay. And he was very supportive. And I'm really, really blessed in the fact that I have a partner who doesn't ask me. He asks the questions when completely necessary, of course. Or I come home with a bunch of bags. Where'd those come from? But he asks the right questions, and I think it's a mark of an intelligent human to know like when to ask the questions and when to sit back and figure it out on your own. He doesn't really push upon his own ideals on me. He never has. He allows me to be the personality that I always am. It's really refreshing. Recovery, I think, has been good for my relationship because I feel like it's allowed me to be a better husband. For a while, it was like for my whole life, it was the Joey show. And it's allowed me to focus on him and be a little less selfish. It's been good.
When you went to treatment, did he do the family program? Did they have a family program with your treatment?
We did, but you know what? I never really had like much resentment toward him. I think he knew what I was struggling with. Again, like the communication was always really good in our relationship. And no, he's always been super supportive. And I think that's been the saving grace for me, is always having like a partner that I could really be honest with and just say like, this is what I'm struggling with. And I think I've always had the words to describe the situations I was going through. And I think that's just as a result of being like hyper independent and always like super analytical of things going on around me and able to process them in real time. But I think the struggle for me too was thinking that everyone else could think like, yeah. And even as a kid, when I always thought like adults were so much smarter. And now as I'm an adult, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did these people get through life? Some of these people, I'm like, how did you get here? That's the one thing too I recognize is like, you really give everyone the benefit of the doubt that they know more than you. And it's kind of a sad, dark reckoning when you realize that no one knows like what's right for anyone, but maybe themselves. And some people barely.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And he's always been respectful of you going to meetings, because I've seen so many couples and relationships that have gone this way, like separated because the partner's like, wait a minute, you're going to meetings all the time? Why aren't you home with me? Like, you're going out again? You're going to another meeting tonight? Are you serious? And he doesn't get upset by that.
No, he doesn't. I think he's seen the transformation in me too. I think he's seen that I'm happier. I'm more grounded. I love the fellowship that we're around. He sees that I'm surrounded by good people. These aren't like party friends. These are like actual good friends that are there for me. And I think he respects that. And I kind of look at the people from the rooms like these are my colleagues. You know, we go to work every day just on ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think he really, really respects that. And I'm really, really fortunate to have that because I recognize that most.
I know it's huge. That is so, because that gives you, that's going to give you, the background to take you to the next level, which is going to be forever have this sobriety and have this relationship, and your marriage will stay strong because you have that. It's not him going, "What are you doing?" He's like supporting you 110%.
Yeah.
Kudos to him. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Now, I wanted to ask, what would you give advice to somebody who's also going through this and they are married and they have decided that they need to get sober or they want to get sober?
I don't think I'm in a position to give anyone marriage advice. But what I will say is rigorous honesty with everything. It's the lightest. It really is the lightest and easiest. And it's hard to say because, not everybody has a partner that's open or like, listen, some people, may have been lying a lot. So maybe their partner doesn't really trust them and the people they're around. But, I think if you're practicing the principles and you're really living in the program, your partner will start to see the change. And maybe not right away. And maybe you have to earn your family's trust back again, which I totally understand. But I think you've got to let your actions speak for themselves. I don't think there's possibly a way to, I don't know, to make things easier. I recognize that like a lot of people, coming into the rooms like have to undo a lot of damage. I don't know. I'm not, I don't like giving advice, to be honest.
But I love to.
Yeah, I know. But and the funny thing is on the topic of advice, like I feel like I've gotten a lot of bad advice in sobriety too. And I think as a newcomer, everyone wants to like come in and help. And I think some people think, and some people are, but some people are better than others, let's just say that, at giving advice. And I think for me, coming around the turn on year one, I was like, I don't even have to entertain it. Like in the beginning, I would listen, and now I'm kind of just like, I didn't ask for advice. I think the mark of a person whose program I admire will, as I'm venting or whatever, will say, okay, well, do you want me to listen or do you want my advice? And I love when people do that because sometimes I just want to vent. I don't want you to help me figure out my way through it. I want to figure out my way, but I just need to talk it through. So I always try to be like that too. Like even with my sponsee, I'm just kind of like, I don't want to lead him any which way. I try to like listen like a good therapist would and not impose upon anything that I'm thinking and kind of let them figure it out on their own.
But it's so nice when we bring God into it. That's what I love the best.
Yeah.
Because I feel like God's in all of us. And if we just let go to that, like all the beauty happens. Like once you let the light in, I always say, like my soul when I was drinking was like an old church, the stained glass in an old church, especially when you're in Europe and you go to these old churches and you see these stained glass windows that are absolutely beautiful. But nobody's had time or money to clean them, right? But my soul was like that until I got sober and I could take the soot off and the light could shine through. And then you can do whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just beautiful.
We're like trophies that needed polishing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Like we're all beautiful beings. And I think some are sicker than others and some have different, it's all different because we're human, right? Mm-hmm. We're not robots. That's the one thing that I've always thought about. It's like they give the same treatment to everybody, but I'm like, wait a minute. I like this thing and they like that thing. And how are we getting the same treatment? But some of it works and some of it might not work, but it's just how we come together and communicate on a level of pure honesty and feeling safe in a room to be able to share what we're going through is just so amazing. So now to my next topic, which is, so you were in corporate America. I mean, you made it to the top. You're working at Ralph Lauren. I mean, the best designer one of the best for me, at least, my opinion, is that one of the best designers. And then you worked for one of the biggest power companies in the country. And you decide, wait, stop, pivot. What happened? Tell us what happened and what that was like and how your psyche changed and what you're doing now.
At first it was really dark. At first it was really dark because I think I was grieving the loss of an identity. My corporate identity was like everything for me. And I think I used that to hide away the idea of being very different from most people. For a while, I was able to harness that creativity, especially because I was in corporate marketing my entire career and I loved it. And when I started to see cracks in that and started to see like that I was living my life for my job, and then it was a job that I really didn't like. And what I will say is I'm such a product of my environment, and I just didn't mesh well with my colleagues in my like last corporate role. It was really hard to reconcile because my colleagues generally would become like family to me, and I just felt like I felt kind of othered in the position that I came to Florida for, and I didn't like it, and I was so bitter about it. I was so sad about it, and I would wake up in the middle of the night like shaking, having just terrible anxiety attacks. It was tough, and I couldn't work my way through it. And then when I resigned from that job, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I started to go into what I really only knew was kind of like South Florida real estate. And I knew I didn't want to be a realtor. With all due respect to realtors, I can't stand them. There's a lot of them. There's some really good ones and there's some really bad ones, and no disrespect to good ones. But I recognized I didn't want to be. I wanted to be in real estate in some capacity, and I think business is art, and I identify as an artist. And I started doing flips. So I would buy a property, I'd lipstick it up, and I'd sell it, and I started to do really well for myself. What I didn't do well with was the unstructured free time. Was really rough because there was no one, there was no one to report to. There was no time to be. I was able to be at the job site whenever I wanted. I was able to be at the job site drunk. I was able to hang out by the pool at the job site and drink with the workers. I mean, I called the shots. So there was, and for me, living in Florida, like I always identified warm weather and sitting by the pool with rosé all day. And that's just what I thought the good life was. When you're by the pool, like, you need a margarita or, you need a White Claw. And I didn't know how to manage that lifestyle with grace. I didn't know how to manage it whatsoever. And that was the toughest part. So I was grieving this life of who I was. I had plenty of free time. I had plenty of access to whatever I wanted. And it was like me running the show into the ground, to be honest. And that part was dark because I was so bitter. And I was out to prove to everyone. I thought everyone was against me. And anytime someone went against me, even if I was like, that wall should be blue, and they'd be like, no, it should be gray. And I'd be like, oh, they're all against me, And I took everything so personally for a while. And it got very exhausting. Very exhausting. And I drank over it. And I drugged over it. And I wanted to numb it. And instead of amplifying situations, which is what I used to do, I just wanted to be numb so bad. I didn't want to feel anymore. I didn't want to feel what I was feeling. And I isolated from friends. I isolated from family. And I kind of became a shell of who I thought I was. Somebody who was always very confident in who they were because I was hyper independent from a young age. The pendulum just swung to the other side. And it was a dark few years that it took me a lot of work and just coming to terms before I could really get out of it and understanding why I'd even gotten that place in the first place. But yeah, coming out of corporate America and into like the Joey show was a wild, wild ride, to say the least.
You're very courageous because so many people wouldn't have the courage to say, you know what, this isn't working. I can't I can't do this anymore. But I can't do this anymore. But what am I going to do if I don't do it?
Mhm.
I don't have enough to live on. I don't have, I've put faith in myself. The structure I have here, I go to work. I know where I'm supposed to be. I know what time I'm supposed to eat lunch. I know what time I'm supposed to be done working. And then you say, you know what? I can't do it anymore. And you walk away. It's very courageous. I mean, you should be really proud of yourself because so many people stay for the fear of what it could be if they left.
Yeah, I never really gave myself credit for that until more recently. I always thought I was kind of a coward. I took it as running.
Wow.
You know, there's a lot of instances in my life where I thought I was running from something, when in reality I was closing on the door on something that just wasn't working for me. But it took me a while to find my footing and to find that confidence again, and consider my craft to be an art form. Before I should say I went to treatment in 2019, and thank God, because it was right before the pandemic and it slowed things down. I got out of treatment. I was like, oh, okay, I'm okay. You know, I didn't feel healed necessarily, but I felt like I had slowed down the fast moving train wreck that was just the Tasmanian devil of a lifestyle I was living for a while. It slowed it down. I wasn't adding more fuel to the fire. And life got better. I got back into corporate America. I had a completely remote job, which was, I guess it was good for me in a sense of it gave me some structure, but I missed the community of being around people. And that's when I started to realize, like, oh, I actually need people. I need colleagues. Like, I can't just be alone all day. And I need to be around people that understand me. So while I was around construction sites and such, I was around different people. You know, it was like there was a lot of that hyper toxic masculine energy that I never identified with, and then trying to like make them do things I needed them to do was a whole nother ballgame. Um, but it was reflective in that sense, and life changed. It didn't get like much better, but it did, and I started to see the gifts of a slower, easier lifestyle. And I just remember just before I decided to really surrender. It was 2023, and I kept saying to Anthony, it feels like 2019 again, where a lot of the same cards were being dealt. A lot of the same situations were being dealt to me, and I was handling them much more differently than I had in the past. And so it was the very start of a spiritual awakening, where I recognized that like I could handle things differently than I had in the past and possibly get a better result. And the less control I took, the better. And I had this one property, this project that was massive. And it was running me to the ground. I mean, it almost took out my marriage. It was a big project. And at the very end of that, once I sold that, and it was the biggest project of my career by far. And I remember just looking out at the ocean and thinking to myself, like, it was such a sigh of relief that was over. And it was such a stressful situation. And I just remember being so happy that I had gotten through this. And I kind of felt like I was on top of the world, like I got everything I ever wanted on paper. Like I finally built myself back up again. And I just remember looking out and just being like, I can't do this on my own. I can't do this on my own because like the things that I'd been through, I'll probably go through again. There's no saying at the age of, I think I was 36. There's no saying that like none of this stuff was going to come through my life again. And while things were really, really good, inevitably they would not stay that way. And I was petrified. I was completely petrified of going through what I had gone through already. And I knew that I had the tools in my toolbox. I just hadn't deployed them. And I was like, this is the final step in all of this. Just like, I've gotta just turn my will over. And that's when I stepped into the rooms, and I've never looked back. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my entire life, hands down.
I love that. And I love that you said toolbox because for me, I always tell people I'm working with and any person that's going through a tough time, if you're an addict or not an addict, because so many people go through things. It's like we have to rebuild our toolbox. That old wrench and that old hammer and that old screwdriver, which it really isn't those things, but the tools we have, we need to sharpen them and we need to get into a new act of life. Like we're looking at a play, we're in act one again and realizing, like I heard you describe the insanity of going, I'm watching the same thing over and over and over again. And I want a different result. I don't want this result anymore. So how am I going to change this? And then going into the rooms, which is, again, it's so courageous because so many people, like today, I had the opportunity to go into a meeting with somebody for their first time and tears were running down my face because I remember the first time I went in and said, I need help. Because like, I feel like probably like you, aren't we raised that we don't need help?
Mhm. Or that other people would help you through, when the reality is like you got to help yourself first.
Yeah.
You know, before you could be helped by others, you need the willingness first of all. But no one can save you but yourself.
No. But it takes strength to say I need help,
Yeah.
even though for growing up it was weakness, right?
Yeah.
Always weak to say I want help. It's like, wait, you don't have. I mean, I was always like, I got this, I got it.
Mhm.
I don't need any help.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing. I had no idea what the hell I was doing.
Yeah.
Don't you agree? It's
Yeah.
like, and we're faking it.
Yeah. Everyone's faking. That's the thing. It's like no one knows exactly.
No. So are you still building houses now?
Yeah. I've slowed down significantly. You know, I was really fortunate coming out of COVID. I was really well positioned, and it allowed me to live the lifestyle of an early retiree. I've been going by the moniker the retired millennial for some time now because I left corporate life and I put myself first. And for the past while, my number one job was recovery. And it worked. And I recognize like what a privilege that is too, to put that first, because most people don't have that. Like most people have to live their life and recover. And man, that's a real tough job.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it put my recovery into hyperdrive because I was able to really focus on, like they said, meeting makers make it. Great, I'll be at 8. You know, like I really took the literature seriously. I lived the big book. I love when they say in the big book, I always recite this. It's so glamorous when the big book refers to it as a design for living. I was like, oh, that's like when I used to picture like the martini lifestyle. I think now and I hear design for living and I was like, oh, that's the glamorous life. Like the glamorous life is the life laid out for us in the big book. And all I needed was just to read that and I was hooked. I also love how the big book calls it the society.
Yeah.
Doesn't it sound so sexy? Like the society? I'll take that. But no, yeah, like the first year was all of that. And rigorous honesty and really working the steps and coming to terms with the piece. And so to answer your question, yeah, I still I just have one really big project right now, and generally, which is something I've uncovered through the steps, is, you know, for me being a real estate developer and flipper, I would constantly be moving. So it's hard to envision where you're going to be in 5 years, in 2 years, in 2 months if you're constantly, you know, selling your safe haven. And so this current project that I really, really love, I intend to stay there for a little bit. Now, everything's for sale, of course, but for the most part, I intend to sit for a little bit and bask in this one because we both worked really hard to get to this place, and I don't I'm not just ready to give this one up just yet. So I think in designing this one especially, we've been really honest about designing it for ourselves and not like what a buyer wants. It's kind of what we want. And we trust that, like, you know, maybe someone will come along that like wants what we want. I don't know, but yeah, I don't intend on selling my house from from under us this time around, although it sounds nice in theory and I'd like to see it. I think I've been fortunate enough to where like I don't have do that right now, and it's kind of a blessing.
It's so funny because earlier before we started recording, we were talking about Joey's parents, and his family's been in the jewelry business. And for those of you that know me know I love jewelry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, your mom must have the best jewelry collection. And he's like, nope, nope, they sold everything because everything is a price tag.
Everything's for sale, yeah.
But does it really? Like at some point, you just get to this place where you're like, you know what? I just want to be have roots.
Yeah, I'd like to believe I'm there. I'd like
Yeah.
to believe I'm there because I feel like it was a gift and a curse, right? I mean, it allowed me the ability to not have so much attachment from an early age.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't so attached to material things. The flip side is like the ones I really like, I'm like completely attached to, and why I'm such a hoarder sometimes
Yeah.
because I don't want to give stuff away. But yeah, it's interesting where like it worked for me for a while. Like it really helped me in real estate because I wouldn't become attached to these homes that I live in, or these projects that I would develop. And then after a while, I'd feel kind of naked without the assets, like we become so attached to these material things. And then after a while, I need to gobble up another one. Like early in sobriety, like I was on this like hunt. I was like, I'm going to build my portfolio again. And then I was like, funny enough, I backed out of more deals in my first year of sobriety than my entire career combined. And I think it was because I was checking my motives constantly. I was doing a daily inventory and recognizing that like my ego was still running rampant. And it was like, we need to buy a property. Like you're only as good as the assets you have. And I was like, oh my God, we're still broken, huh? My sponsor, God love him, I love him. He's like, dude, like, what do you can't just like fix problems by throwing money at them. And I was like, oh, he was right. Like my motives weren't so pure. And I'm so glad that I didn't make any huge life decisions in the first year of sobriety. And I didn't let my ego take play like it did, because my ego screwed me a few times before I was sober, thinking like you need the biggest properties and like you need the biggest projects to work on. And look at me, I'm so great. Like there's a power in the humility, in the sitting back and saying like, I need to put me first. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I took on more projects.
It seems like you're so at peace. And it seems like, I don't know, you figured it out, because so many millennials, now that you're the retired millennials, so many millennials are all about the bling and all about, I just actually did a newsletter about this, about like the social media and how many followers you get. And like, did I get enough likes? And did I get enough this? Do I have enough dollars in the bank account? And, I've been rich and I've been poor, but I feel like when we get to this place, we realize what is really important. What is really important? What is really important to you, Joey?
My health. I'd say my health and my family, and that's it. One of the things that I'd really done throughout all my partying days was I'd party, and I would also work out like a maniac, and I would do like all those boot camps and stuff, and I'd be on these like fad diets and stuff, and I destroyed my body and all of it. And one of the things that happened was I'm epileptic, so I'd have these seizures, and I would blow my shoulders right at the socket. And so as someone who is hyperactive and likes to really just engulf myself in fitness, there were times where, I remember Thanksgiving a couple of years ago where I had just had a rotator cuff surgery and I couldn't get the fork of food to my mouth. And so this is something I think people learn a lot later in life. And as somebody that's not even 40, to recognize that like, this is the only body I've got. And now I have the time to like, just to focus on my health and think about like what I don't want to put in my body, and then what, so yeah, my health, my well-being is the most important thing in my life, and my loved ones and the people I really care about. The material stuff is great, to be honest. Like, I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't like nice things. That'd be a complete lie. But I recognize that like it's not the end all be all. And then like you, I've had it all, I've lost it all, and I've rebuilt it all, but I can do it again. But I don't know. It's that peace and serenity that has no price, no price. And I think you got to be humbled, at least I had to be, to recognize that first.
Now, if you could go back and say to yourself, your young self that was at school in Palm Beach when they rejected you and they were in that dark time, what would you say to that little boy today?
I would say just don't fight it. Just don't fight it, and it was part of the plan. And I wouldn't change a thing if I could go. I really wouldn't change a thing because I feel like I've lived so many lives at this point. And I don't know, Joey's always been a strong kid. I still refer to myself as a kid. I feel like a child. And I feel like there's this childlike wonder that I've always had. It's like amazement with the world around me, like just bewildered. And I would just say don't lose that. And it's okay you're not like everybody else. Like my superpower is that I'm not like everybody else. And don't try to be. Like don't even try to be because you won't be. Um and I would tell him it's gonna get so much better, and it did. And yeah, all the situations that I've been through and put myself through and that the universe has handed me, all blessings in disguise.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You're living the promises, they say.
Yeah.
You know?
Love the promises.
I do
love the promises.
They're my favorite
I love the
things.
promises. We will not regret the past, nor wish to close the door on it. Yeah, like that's one of my favorite promises. I love the promise.
It's
Yeah.
so great when you can look back and not go, oh my God, anymore. It's just so amazing. Now, my last question is this. I watch you all the time on social media, and you do carry a blue rosary.
Yes.
What is that about? Because I'm totally into the rosary these days. And what is the story behind your blue rosary?
When I was in the second grade for communion, I really wanted this like blinged out looking like blue shiny rosary. And for like months I was like telling my parents, I don't know how much they cost, maybe like $50 or something, but like my parents are like, rosary shouldn't be expensive. And I was like, I know, but those are so cool. And I would keep going into the shop that sold these blue rosary. It's like, I want them. And my mom got them for me for my communion in the second grade and surprised me. I was like, oh my God, the blue rosary. And I don't know where they went, but I hadn't seen them in years, and all the moving and relocating and stuff. I hadn't seen them for years, at least since grade school. And right when I had gotten sober, I was going through some old stuff, and I get to the bottom of this box, and there's the blue rosary. And I was just, I was kind of awestruck, and I felt like, and that's kind of like, when you start to get those God winks in early sobriety, and I was like, whoa, I don't know. I was like, he's paying attention. And it just brought me back to where I was as a child. And for me, I love to pray the rosary. Like, I think it's something ingrained in me that's like the mental muscle memory of like the trance that comes over me when I pray the rosary. And I remember in early recovery, I had just found the rosary. My grandmother had just passed away. And so I had to go back to New York. And I just got sober, and I was like, oh, no one knew, no one around me. And I brought the rosary with me. And so the whole time I was ripping onto them the entire, like the 4 days of being in New York, I had this rosary like glued to my hand. And I prayed them the entire time I was there. And I have so many vivid visuals of just like this boy in the church with like, the crucifix up there. And it was like, and the sound of like the music and all that, and the rosary there. And this was the same church that I had my second communion in and my confirmation. It was all this and a total like, full circle moments of like coming back and being in the mind to take it all in. And I gripped them so hard. And funny enough, when I got home, I get off the plane. I close the door to my home. I take the rosary out of my pocket and I put them on my nightstand. And I guess as I'm putting them down, they broke. And it was kind of like their job was done. It was like, for me, it was like God saying like, okay, like this test is complete. And it was weird because like I feel like I would get upset if they broke, but I was like the peace that just washed over me was just unlike anything I'd ever felt before. So I still hang out with them. I still keep them around. Like I have to be careful because they'll end up like all over the place. But they're still I still keep them by my bedside, and I still use them, and they're still there. Yeah, wild.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This is wonderful.
It was absolutely wonderful. If you guys want to reach out to Joey, it's going to be in the description. I'm going to have all of his links for his social media. So if you want to go follow him, you want to go check him out, please go do that. And remember, you guys, you are not alone. It's been such a pleasure. Thanks for listening to Conversations with Busy. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, if you could subscribe, that would mean the world to me. And follow me on all social media. And you can also get my newsletter every Friday morning into your inbox. Just go to elizabethchance.com and subscribe. Take care.